Good afternoon. So today we are going to be installing this short shifter on my 2004 C5 Z06. So this is a shifter that a guy on the forums actually builds. He takes the stock lower box and then modifies it to put some needle bearings in there. Builds this end cap for it to replace a lot of the rubber bushings, and then also builds this top piece to replace the top upper half of the shifter. And this particular one comes with a threaded body on the top, so it fits just like a normal C5 Z06 shifter. But this is the 20% reduction throw. His name is Tom. He goes by TMOD Customs. That's on, you can follow him on Instagram or whatever, he's on there as well. But anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing today, and then we'll get into some of the close-ups of the shifter. Alright, so we're now in the car. I have a tape measure out just to kind of measure the throw of the stock shifter. This is going to be pretty crude, and hopefully this LED light behind me doesn't destroy the videotape here, but basically I have it in first gear right now, and this isn't the stock knob, but let's say we just go by the base of the shaft there. So forward, you're about 4 inches from the center console there, right under the heater. So then if we were to say go to second, so if you look back here now, so we're about 7 inches from the same point that we started with. So you've got 3 inches of travel from front to back for first to second gear, and basically third to fourth and fifth to sixth is going to be ultimately the same. It's just going to be positional left to right, or for you nerds, the x-axis. So take the measurement from side to side. So if I put the center of the tape there at the 3 inch mark, and we go left to right, when we go left, we're going to be about 3/4 of an inch to the center of the shaft. And then if you go, make sure it's centered again, and we go to the right, we're going to be about 3/4 as well. So it's about 1.5 inches from left to right, or passenger to driver's seat, in terms of the, we'll call this the x-axis, and then this will be the y. So we've got 3 inches from front to back, so the y-axis, and then we've got 1.5 inches for the x-axis. So once I get this all out and put the new one in, we'll measure it again. Alright, once you get the center console piece out, I'll just go over this really quick. There's a screw up here by the, oh boy, major shadow there, but screw by the key. There's for that air temperature sensor. There are 2 relative to that center console piece. There are 2 studs here, you take the nuts off, and then there's 2 studs back here for the back rear piece, that waterfall piece or whatever. And for the sake of ease, I just removed the whole thing and threw it outside the car there. But the next piece, you got your shift knob off. You're going to need to take that knob off. If you have a stock knob, you're going to need to pop the cover off, and I can explain that in a second. But I have the aftermarket knob, so it just screws on. So I unscrewed it. You're down to the shifter itself. You've got these 410s to remove the cover. So go ahead and do that now. I actually use a little cordless impact there. Kind of blast these guys off. Just make quick work of this. So you can put these to the side. You'll see what I'm doing here. So then you take this rubber cover off, throw that on your floor over there, and then you have access to the box itself and the shifter. So then you're going to end up taking this Torx out, and these 2 Torx that hold the whole box in, and remove that. So I'm going to grab a Torx and then adjust, and we'll be right back. Alright, so now that we have the Torx ready, I'm going to try the little impact here and see if this will knock these out. But I'm using a T40, and that seems to be relevant for all three of those bolts that are in here. So the first thing, I just made sure it's in neutral, so that way nothing gets out of whack here. So impact seems to work well. Just be careful when you get to the top. You know, you don't want to drop that thing down there, because I'm sure it's not that easy to recover. So just take it out so that you can start really grabbing it by hand. You know, put that one to the side. So that's going to be your shifter rod, your linkage, and then the other two are going to be your assembly holders. So we can take those out. Again, these are T40s as well. All seems to be not too tight. So again, just get them so that way you're doing a little bit by hand, and take your time. Just be careful so you don't drop them, because that probably really sucks. And then you got to get the magnet out, and sometimes you never find them. And they all, just for reference, are the same length, and they all have the same tip, so you can't screw up which one goes where. So once you take the screws out, you basically can lift it up, and you can kind of see the angle. You get the front out, kind of like you're launching a boat there, and then you should be able to just kind of wiggle the whole thing out. So now you got the whole assembly out, the rod's out, and your shift linkage rod is still in there, and then your two blocks for your torque tube where you mount the shifter tube. So I am going to, it would seem as though the bushings, well, we'll figure that out in a second. We'll talk about that in a minute. Alright, so now with the old one out, I just want to compare these two, because I think there's a couple little differences here between the Z06 stuff and the regular C5. And I thought these would be okay, and I could knock the bushings out, but apparently that's not the way this works. So the new shifter comes with, Tom does these urethane little gummies basically for around the bushing, you know, to make the vibration a little bit less and obviously more comfortable in the car. The issue with the Z06 stuff, or at least in comparison, the Z06 does not have the little gummies, obviously. It does have the top metal insert there, as well as the old one. I'll try and do my best here to get the thickness, but you can see that the Z06 stuff is significantly thicker than the regular C5, and that's because this casting is basically the bushing. So I guess I'm a little sad about that. I was hoping that the new one was going to have the metal, and it was going to be basically exactly the same, and I wasn't going to have to worry about any of that stuff. Not that I really have to worry about it, but I would rather keep the stiffness of the Z06 versus the little gummy inserts. But I guess we'll see how it feels, and then if I don't like it, I'll send my other body back and have it machined, and that'll be the end of it. Nonetheless, we're going to just install it and see where we end up. But that's really the only at least change between the Z06 and the regular C5 that I see. So if you look to the side here, you can see this is where Tom does the custom end cap, and then puts his own screws in, compared to the plastic end cap with this little metal rod here. The other end looks to be identical in terms of the bushing and the roller bearing. You see that one just new. And then obviously the tops are slightly different in that here's the stock top, and then it's got like the little, I guess you'd call this a counterweight, but weight for the shifter, compared to what Tom does here. And as I mentioned before about the rotation, the stock shifter doesn't rotate back and forth, so this is solidly mounted in the shift box, whereas this shifter, you can actually, if you watch the hex key there, you can see the keyway turn. This rotates inside the spherical bearing. So we'll see how that feels in relation. And then in terms of height and that sort of thing, get that out of the way. So if you kind of line up where they are here, where the end of the shifter is itself, is probably about identical to the stock height. So it's going to be stock height. The throw will just be reduced. So that's kind of nice too, that it's going to retain the height versus get sucked into the boot like some of those short throws, and be kind of in the way, especially if you're going to do road racing or something. It's always nice to have like a solid handle to kind of grab on. But anyway, that's the main comparisons I see between my stock box and the one that Tom had sent me. So we'll see how the rest of the install goes. It should go really quick. So here's the face-to-face comparison of the stock Z06 box versus Tom's aluminum cap. So basically similar in dimension, but Tom uses this, let's see if I can get a light here. He uses a needle bearing assembly in the back end of the bushing and this aluminum housing versus that journal type bearing that's in there and this plastic end cap. So the longevity of this needle bearing is going to be a lot more life than that plastic piece. And then on the inside, it's basically the same shift ball fork it's the factory shift fork. So that's one of the biggest things is just the end cap, and then the obvious piece here is the top of the shifter. So the stock Z06 shifter, you pull it out, there's 4 screws in the top, then there's a plastic little ball socket thing in there that goes into this cup basically that rotates in different axes here, and so you can move it all around. This is the difference between Tom's shifter and then the stock Z06, but you can see the Z06 stock shifter has basically a plastic little ball cup that just kind of snaps on the end of the shift rod, and then Tom has this what looks to be Delrin with the screw in the bottom that holds it on, but for the purpose, basically the same purpose here. There's the shift tuning fork on the inside of Tom's box, and then the stock Z06, so it uses that stock linkage. And the other thing to note too, how you get the reduction in throw, which I'll go into in a second. You can see the pivot point or the fulcrum point of the shifter is in a different location height-wise, so then that enables you in a different moment to get a reduction in throw. But those are the big differences between the stock Z06 and then Tom's box. So here's a little trigonometry on why short shifters work or reduce the fore and aft throw or the Y direction. So basically, if you look at the top end, so this was the top of our shifter, you have I have a 3, a 2, and basically a 0. So this would be our center line through the shifter. And then if we said it was 2 inches of throw versus 3 inches of throw. So you can see if you had 3 inches of throw, which is what we measured with the factory shifter, and then this would be the full range of motion for the factory shifter, but for the sake of what we're discussing, it's the 3 and the 3. So then if you were to go down to the bottom, right, you have the 3 and the 3. So basically this corresponding line is created around that fulcrum point or that rotation point. So again, for the 3 and the 3. So now if you were to go to a 2 and a 2, again you'd have that equal and opposite here, 2 and a 2. Now you can easily see that if you were just to reduce your motion at the top, that doesn't necessarily correspond to you being successful getting to where you need to be with the shifter at the bottom. So you have a 2 and a 2 and a 3 and a 3. So you really need to get to the 3 motion from the 2 position, right? So if you come over here, this is kind of what ends up happening. So if you move that pivotal point or that fulcrum point, basically you can get to your 2 and 2 motion by transitioning it up. So if you were to go this direction, you move it up, you're now at the the two position here from the height change. So that's essentially how you get to the 20% throw reduction fore and after in the Y direction. And that's really the only way, unless you were to truly change the mechanics of how the shifter worked. So that's why you kind of get limited in terms of positional change and what it looks like once the shifter's in. Now side to side is a completely different trigonometry equation here, but ultimately that's why when you get the shifter in, it's a 20% throw reduction. The height is changed of that ball socket, which then corresponds to the still maintaining the 3 position here, but you get to that like 2 or 2.5 technically, or 2 5/8 on this particular shifter. But that's just a quick little brief on why it works. Okay, so when you're about to put this thing in, I just tried putting it in without the little gummies on the bottom, just to put it in there, and so I didn't drop them somewhere. But that seems to be a royal PETA. So I would put the gummies on and make sure they're on there, and I kind of turned it upside down just a little bit just to make sure they didn't fall off. And then you're going to get this rod in first for the shifter, and obviously don't forget there's a keyway there for the screw that you take out, or the bolt that you take out. So I'm going to slide that in first and keep it in neutral as best as possible so it goes in real easy, and then all the keyways line up. But I'm going to do this, and then I will show you the keyway and everything in position in a second. Alright, when you put this in, just have some patience. And as you can see, I've got it all in the box here. The keyway is visible. I'm not putting any bolts in yet. What I'm going to do is put the side ones in first, these two, just so I don't lose my gummies on the bottom. And then I'm going to put that bolt in for the keyway for the shifter shaft, and just make sure everything's lined up. Then I'll go ahead and snug everything up and put the cover on, and yeah, well, then we'll see how it feels. So again, these are, I don't know if you can make that out, but they're a little slotted, so you do have some play in that y-axis like I referenced before. So you can kind of manipulate it around a little bit just to get it where you need it to be. And as I mentioned, these bolts are all the same, so there should be no challenge to get the bolts in at all. There's no difference between the 3, so you can't mess them up. So once you get them in there, I'm going to get these started with a regular wrench or ratchet. That way nothing gets stripped out. Put this in here, get this going. That one seems to be pretty good. This one feels a little bit tighter, needs a little bit of a wiggle. And I'm just going to leave these loose, so that way I can get that, like I said, this other screw in for where the neutral is. It's in there. So we're going to move this back slightly just to get it in right. Go right in. And just by hand, I'm going to tighten this up a little bit just to get it started. I don't want to jack any of the threads up. Alright, so we have it all snugged in there by hand pretty much. I'm going to get my ratchet so I can tighten this screw up for the shift shaft, and then I'll tighten up the bushings, and we'll see how loose it feels in all directions. But it seems to be fairly tight right now, but it's not tightened up. So give me one second. Okay, so it's all in. This is probably a better example of what spin I was talking about before, but you can see that it spins in the spherical, like I said. So that's the one thing that it's kind of different. You got to get used to it. It would seem that the bushings, even though they're little rubber gummies, it seems like it's mounted pretty solid, in that it looks like the torque tube moves when I pull the shifter more so than the actual box itself. but it is definitely like from left to right. I mean, you can see, I don't know if you remember before, but we're probably like 3/4 of an inch or so, maybe an inch at max, from left to right, or in the x-axis, versus before it was 1.5 inches. And then from forward to back, feels a little bit less for sure, but it is definitely very machine-like, which is, I mean, the way I wanted it to be. So pretty excited about that. And then you can see with the whole Delrin knob, kind of where the height is. So if you were like really road course racing the car or whatever, it'd be really accessible and easy to kind of grab the shifter, versus my knob is probably going to be a little bit further down. But we'll see. I'm going to put the other one on and see where it lands. This is a good, good diameter, good height, especially for my hand. If you do the knob comparison. Okay, so I put my other knob back on just to see, kind of as a reference point for height. It seems to be about the same. It feels pretty good. One thing I did notice now that I've been banging this thing around for a second or two, if you watch down here, right where the gummy is, the bushing, I call them gummies because that's basically what they are. They're supposed to be urethane, but they're like basically the durometer of a gummy bear, it seems like. But basically, if I put it in first and I pushed on it, try and get the best angle here, you can see the whole shift box kind of moving, right? Where I think on the Z06 one, because it's all solid, you wouldn't have any movement, which is, I mean, kind of the point. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you have the top cover on. This only goes one way. There is like a racetrack underneath on the underside. I didn't show it, but on the underside that goes over the top of the tunnel. And you can see that this sticks up just a little bit because this inside lip and boot used to sit kind of like over and in the old shifter, but because this spherical bushing area that was machined, it kind of offsets it a little bit, but it shouldn't be an issue because there's obviously the decorative boot over the top of this. And while you're in here, it's a good time to install your LED flash relay if you have one of those, just because you have most of the panels off and it's really only like 2 more screws and a pull pin. But yeah, so I went ahead and did that. I'm going to try the shifter out with the rubber gummy bushings for a little while, see how I like it, and if it seems fine, then I'll just rock and roll with the with it in. It kind of seems like the movement, I mean, it's pretty minimal, but we'll see how it feels. And I don't know if this is just because I'm not pushing in the clutch, but the rod does seem to get a little bit stuck when I try and go into like the fifth side. It doesn't necessarily revert back like it does on the first, but we'll see how it feels, and then once I get it all back together, take it for a rip and see what it does. Alright, so we have it all back together. I have my shift knob that I had on there before. Again, if you guys remember when I started this, we were about 3 inches front to back, so we're at about 5.5 at the center point from the front panel. Well, it seems to be about the same throw, at least in the Y direction, and then in the X direction it's definitely shorter, but I don't know, unless I'm losing my brains here, but it definitely seems to be the same as it was before. So if I go there, that's like 4 inches, if you can see that. We're back to center, so we're about 5.5 here, and then we go back to almost 7. So 6 3/4 if you want to get technical, because the rod's kind of hidden. So again, 4 to, let's say, 6.5, even 6 3/4, 7, you're still at 3 inches. So that's right where, unfortunately, it was before. So it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot there, but it's definitely shorter side to side. Anyway, go for a ride and we'll see what it's like. Okay, so I've had this shifter in for, I guess, over a week and a half now. feels pretty good. It's definitely shorter side to side or in that X direction. I haven't missed a shift or had any problem shifting. The only issue that I have had is really reverse can be sometimes a bear to get into. And in general, just in stock form, I think it's a little troublesome at times. But for the most part, the throw in that Y direction is reduced, not by much. It is only 20%, and as we talked about before, with relative to where that fulcrum point is for the pivot point for the shifter, you can only do so much with so much height. There is only so much room to work in the stock location as well. So other than that, the side-to-side feels real good. I like the mechanical notchiness of the shifter. That's kind of, I think from what I've read, a lot of the short shifters are that way. But Tom does a nice job with the machining and the different pieces. And he gives great support. So if you have any questions or any concerns with what you've purchased or what you were supposed to get, he's relatively quick to answer emails and then get stuff shipped out. I mean, I think I had my shifter once. He said it shipped. It was like 2 days. So pretty quick there. And one note is don't forget to send your old box or your old lower back to him, including that little shifter linkage, because he does need these to then machine out and get you guys your shifters when you buy them, because if he has no cores, he can't give you a shifter in return. So anyway, that's my two thoughts on the shifter. I don't know that it lights the world on fire for me as a short shifter. This has nothing to do with TMOD Customs in his shifter itself. I think I just had different expectations of getting it and how short the throw is actually going to be in comparison to stock form. So again, I think I heightened my expectations of what I was expecting to get, and relative to the side-to-side motion, it feels great. But like I said, the Y direction, it's pretty close to stock. So, I think I had a different mindset when I was ordering it, but nonetheless, it has nothing to do with Tom or his TMOD Custom boxes or his shift assemblies. His work on here is great. Again, if you're looking for a short shifter, this is a good alternate option. It's good to support some local business as well as a guy off the forum. So thanks for watching. Have a good night. Rox, do you approve of the shifter?